First is a phrase you've heard me use a lot before that is frustration arises when expectations differ. So where my mind goes first, if I'm feeling frustrated or down or negative or something that's on the wrong side of the fence, my first question goes to what expectation or expectations have I set up of myself? And I'm very careful about not using the word realistic because I'm the guy who believes that if it's important enough to you or to me, that you'll ultimately find a way to do it. I would propose to you, though, that sometimes when we set expectations or we create expectations in our mind, it's not so much that the expectation is unrealistic. It may be that the timeline that we expect that thing to happen in is less realistic, or the probability of that thing happening in that timeline is really low. So we kind of set ourselves up for failure, at least mentally or from a mindset standpoint. I would start with this, like, are your expectations in alignment with like high probability outcomes, or are you putting too much like unrealistic pressure on yourself or setting up expectations in too narrow of a time window that the probabilities are just stacked against you? Most optimistic go-getters overestimate what they can do in a short period of time. So there's like a stamina check on this as well. I'm grinding toward this outcome. I know my expectations are properly aligned, but the world and the market are not doing you any favors right now. You've got maybe just the faintest sign of a tailwind right now that's sort of seasonality based, but there's not like a strong wind blowing at your back right now that would make it easier. So there is kind of this almost like necessary grind. And this is not just in real estate, this has been a lot of businesses right now. So kind of checking in on like how much mental stamina do I have and what are the things that I could do to give me more mental stamina, and then physical, and then financial. I would consider the activities that I'm doing now, and I would compare those to activities that I'd done in a previous period. So if we're talking about like the first 4 months of this year compared to the first 4 months of last year, I would say, okay, if my goal was to do 30% more units this year than last year, am I doing 30% more activities now than I was last year? If I have an expectation or a goal, where's the misalignment that's causing me to not be on that trajectory? And a lot of times what I'll see is that people will set some really ambitious growth goals. They wouldn't make an adjustment, any meaningful adjustment to their activities. So now there's this misalignment between the expectations and the activities. Where have I made meaningful progress that should cause me to have the expectation of this type of growth? Do I have new or different strategies that I'm executing on? And then how much have my skills grown in those comparisons as well? So my expectations are properly set, whatever that represents to you. I have the appropriate amount of mental, physical, and financial stamina to kind of grind it out, given that we don't really have any tailwinds going on right now. I understand where I am kind of benchmarking relative to the market. And now I'm looking at what changes, meaningful changes have I made in activities, strategies, or skills. And if I can kind of build that little puzzle out, now I can sit back and say, okay, well, maybe the reason I'm not firing on all cylinders, if applicable, is sort of this framework that ties a properly set mind or attitude to some quantifiable expectations.